Chapter 23. Luli. Sweet fire? Wake up, sweet fire. It was as if the world had been reduced to black ash. Luli. Luli. Luli startled. Baba? No one else used that ridiculous call except for her father. She groggily searched for the darkness in the darkness for him. I am here, sweet fire. The strange darkness abruptly receded, revealing a corridor filled with elaborate mosaics and eerie skull-shaped sconces. She squinted into the dark, but perceived no end to the hallway. A thick silence hung in the air, making her uncomfortably aware of her breathing, but it was shattered before she could ponder it. Over here, Luli. She saw him in the distance then, silhouetted in a blue light emitted by the candles. Her father. Broad-shouldered and tall, with deep brown eyes that tinkled with permanent amusement. In one hand he held a lantern, with the other he beckoned her closer. Baba? Her heart thudded. Once. It can't be. Twice. You're dead. She moved toward him in a daze, or at least she tried to, but every time she stepped forward, he appeared farther away. Sweet fire, he called from a distance. Come, follow me. He turned, and his robes, the same robes she wore as the midnight merchant, brushed the ground with the motion. She hesitated. This was clearly a trick. She did not have time to chase mirages down dark corridors. She turned around, searching for the entrance. She saw only a dead end. The sight filled her with exasperation. Wonderful. Hurry, the phantom called. Unpleasant things roam the dark, sweet fire. Sure enough, she became aware of shifting, of whispers in her ears. She suppressed a shudder and started walking. She began formulating a plan. Step 1. Avoid getting devoured by sentient darkness. But while she could escape the dark, she could not run from the voices. The closer she drew to the mirage of her father, the louder they became. She gritted her teeth and touched her rings, focused on the burning at her fingertips. None of this is real. This is magic. This is... Her father began to sing. The stars, they burn the night and guide the sheik's way. Luli startled. Where did she recognize that song from? The more she thought about it, the cloudier her mind became, until only the lyrics remained. The song filled her with warmth and longing. It made her feel like she was coming home. Yes, her father said softly, we are going home. Home? The word was faint on her lips. She had given up returning long ago because something had happened. She remembered fire and pain and death. She remembered loss and the denial of loss. She remembered not wanting to remember. Home, her father said gently. But first, we must bring everyone back. Luli nodded slowly, deciding this sounded reasonable, plausible even. She could trust her father. He had never steered her in the wrong direction before, had never... A memory surfaced, shattered and fragile, like a broken glass. In it, she sat by a campfire, knee to knee with her father. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a flat disc made of wood and glass, a compass. There are many mysterious things in the desert, sweet fire. If ever you find such items, you must take great care of them, for they may be relics enchanted by jinn. She remembered the warmth of his hands as he set the compass in her palms. Is this compass filled with magic, then? She'd asked. He'd laughed. It does not work for me, but perhaps it will guide your way. The memory dissipated. Luli squinted, renewed her focus. They were just about to turn a corner when her eyes snagged on a particularly gruesome mosaic. In it, sailors sank beneath blue-black ocean and reached fruitlessly toward the sky. Their mouths were agape, and their eyes bulged grotesquely from their skulls. Luli arched her head and saw the god they were reaching for, a woman with unnaturally pearl-white skin and black eyes that gleamed like ink. Her hair was a mess of ashy flakes that burned like embers as they fell to the ground. A collar of golden bones circled her throat. Luli, her father called, but his voice was far away. She put her hand to the mosaic. It was cold enough to remind her of her burning rings. Reality came crashing back. She remembered suddenly where she'd heard the song, Kadir. This is the song Kadir sings. She turned, but the mirage had already gone ahead. The light was a pinprick of blue in the darkness, and then it was gone. The fire died, and her surroundings vanished. The humming in her head became a shrill buzzing that made her ears pop and her knees tremble. She tasted metal, blood on her lips. She was bleeding from her nose, and her head was pounding so hard she was beginning to feel faint. "Run," she thought. The voice was sharp, like Kadir's. "Run, or you die." She turned and bolted without another thought. The darkness gave chase. It fell on her shoulders and grabbed her ankles and screamed in her ears, "Jinn killer! Murderer!" She was too terrified to object. If only the glowing orb hadn't been shattered in the Sultan's diwan, it would have been useful now. It would have at least illuminated her enemy. But no, she was alone. She was suddenly pinned beneath something full of sharp edges and angles. She panicked and swung out with her elbow. There was a crack, and the thing hissed and drew back. She rolled to her feet and ran. When she looked back, the darkness had swallowed her assailant whole. She was still running when the blackness fractured into fragments of blue gold. Too late, she realized it was someone holding a lantern. She crashed into them, and they both tumbled to the ground in a mess of limbs. Luli untangled herself and sat up. She was shocked to see Aisha bint Luas crouched in front of her, eyes shining like daggers. She had a blade angled toward Luli's neck, but lowered it when she saw her face. There was a moment of tense uncertainty. Truth or illusion? Before Luli could decide, Aisha raised her arm and threw the dagger. It sailed past her shoulder. Luli heard the sound of tearing cloth and then a shriek. Her bones rattled with the sound. It was a sound she'd never heard, and yet she recognized it. It was her father's scream. She turned in place and saw the thing shrieking in her father's voice, a doomed, sinewy, human-shaped creature with hollow eyes and tattered flesh, with 2 long limbs and creaking bones that jutted from the two thin skin-like knives. A ghoul. Not my father. The thought sounded like an alarm as she pulled out Kadir's dagger and rushed the ghoul. Her panic made her vicious, and she rent bloodless flesh from the bone without stopping to breathe. She stabbed and slashed and smashed until there was nothing left to destroy. She was trembling as she crushed the last of the shattered bloodless bones to dust. She had faced ghouls before, but never one like this, never one warped by illusion. She had only ever known ghouls to be trackers, near-blind creatures that smelled magic from a distance and chased the humans bearing its source. They were stealthy creatures, muting sound as their most lethal ability. Often, an unnatural hush came over the desert at their approach. Now, at least, she knew why the corridor had been so quiet before. Aisha bint Luas walked past her with a single sigh. "Salam, al-Nazari." Luli startled at her calm. A layer of sand still glittered on Aisha's cloak and hair from the storm, but she was otherwise unbattered and uninjured. Luli could not help her irritation. She had come here to save this woman, and she had the audacity to sigh as if Luli had been the one to inconvenience her. "Where in the 9 hells have you been? We've been looking all over for you." Luli didn't bother softening her voice. Aisha slid the knife into her belt. "I think the answer was obvious. I've been hunting a jinn. It was even nice enough to welcome me into its home." Luli recalled the strange look on the prince's face when he'd stood before the dune. He'd said something about hearing a woman's voice. It occurred to her that maybe he had been under the voice's spell before she had, and that there was a chance he still was. But it seemed unlikely. The Omar she knew was a killer, not a victim. "Is that what you say when a jinn traps you in a buried ruin?" Luli scowled. "It's welcoming you into its home?" Aisha frowned. "Careful, merchant. I have little patience for your snide remarks, and I have little patience for thieves whose egos are so big they refuse to admit they're lost. If you're such a good hunter, why haven't you already tracked this jinn?" When Aisha turned and walked away, Luli trailed after her. "Well?" She was just about to reach out and grab Aisha's shoulder when she paused, noticing the marks on her arms. Aisha usually wore her cloak closed, so Luli had never noticed the henna patterns trailing up her arms, intricate floral designs that wrapped around her elbows and swirled past her shoulders. She would have thought them uncharacteristic if they had not featured so many thorns and razor-sharp leaves. But it was not the pattern that gave Lily pause, but the marks beneath the henna. Layers of scars, simultaneously veiled and accentuated by the ink in Aisha's skin. The thief turned. "Is there something you want to say, merchant? It seems pointless to ask you another question when you didn't answer my first." She and Aisha frowned at each other. Luli forced herself not to blink. Finally, Aisha turned away. You want the truth? Yes, I'm lost. I got lost in the sandstorm, and now I'm stuck in this hellhole. I've been unable to find my way out since I was pulled in. If you're so full of great ideas, why don't you show us the exit? Luli flushed. Other than the knife, she had only two other items on her. She supposed if there was any time to use them, it was now. She took out the compass first, but quickly abandoned the idea of using it when she saw the arrow spinning in a frenzied circle. Even a silent command could not calm it. The coin only ascertained that she was indeed lost and that yes, there was an exit somewhere. Aisha snorted. So even the legendary midnight merchant is at a loss. Can you be quiet? I'm trying to think. Luli thought about the ghoul masquerading as her father. He'd been trying to lead her someplace before she broke out of her trance. She was sure of it. She looked at Aisha. Did a ghoul try to take you somewhere? Aisha's mouth twisted into a grimace. It didn't get very far, but yes. Looking at the thief's harsher than normal scowl, it occurred to Luli that she must have also seen a ghoul wrapped by an illusion. She wondered who she had seen. Had it been someone from her family? Her despicable jinn-killing master? Aisha looked at her deadpan. You were saying? Luli imagined that her curiosity was aflame and extinguished it. The last thing she needed was to become more involved than she already was with this jinn-killer. She shook her head. I think the ghouls are key to finding our way through this place. Aisha raised a brow. The only way to make it through here is to have a ghoul guide. Was that what she was saying? Physically, there was nothing the ghoul possessed that they did not. It had carried a lantern, but they had one too. It had walked the corridors just as they were walking them now, and it had been singing. The realization hit like a thunderclap. Aisha crossed her arms. I suppose if you want to call that wail a song, what about it? A ludicrous idea came to her, so ludicrous that she nearly laughed aloud. But the song was the only thing missing, so why not try singing it? She faced the infinite dark and took a deep breath. Ignoring the heat in her cheeks, the twisting in her stomach, she let Kadir's song settle in her mind. She focused on the words, ignoring the fact that Kadir had sung them. The stars, they burn the night and guide the sheik's way. The words came slow at first, then faster. A still lake transformed into a fast-moving stream. She blocked out Aisha's laughter and focused on the song. Go to her, they say, the star of your eye. Go to her, the compass of your heart. She felt like she was floating. The song had become a map, the lyrics a path through a foggy, unfamiliar memory. As she sang, the ruins around her blurred and reformed into a magnificent palace of marble and gold. Everything was gloriously bright. The sun, it warms the sand and sets the sheik's heart aflame. She waits in the shade, the sun says, the beloved of your dreams. She waits in the shade, the shade. Luli's feet moved on their own, guiding her down a road that twisted through past and present. She wandered through rooms simultaneously filled with and deprived of color, through courtyards crawling with plants and filled with ash. They passed through chambers filled with buoyant dancers one moment and inanimate skeletons the next, and corridors shining with newness and dull with age. And then, at last, they came to a fragile-looking staircase. A voice spoke loudly in Luli's mind, scattering her thoughts. Welcome, my guests. It was a woman's voice, deep and sonorous. Deceitful jinn-killers, murderers of highest esteem, have you come seeking glory, power beyond your wildest imaginations? The voice laughed, and somehow, despite it being in their heads, the sound made the walls tremble. I am afraid you are too late. Someone has already claimed those honors. But since you've come all this way, please, by all means, come to my chambers. What kind of hostess would I be if I did not entertain my guests? Omar? Aisha murmured at the same time Luli thought, the Queen of Dunes. Luli rushed up the staircase, all the while thinking of the woman from the painting, the one with the ghoulish white skin and black holes for eyes. The Queen of Dunes. Old Ruba's tale of the Jinn Queen poured through her mind like quicksand.